Welcome to our weird world, where each week we gather around a bonfire to uncover the world's most fascinating legends and mysteries. Tonight, we bring you the story of lost hunters of the Appalachian woods. So sit back, relax, and let the flames of our virtual campfire keep the darkness at bay. This tale is steeped in mists, shadows, and a landscape so hauntingly beautiful that it seems to whisper secrets to those who venture too far. The legends, passed down through generations of mountain folk, center on the tragic fate of hunters who dared to challenge the wilderness and become ensnared in its unyielding grip. This is the story of their restless spirits. Long before modern maps carved paths through the Appalachian Range, the mountains were a labyrinth of towering peaks, yawning valleys, and dense forests. It is said that the trees grew so close together that daylight barely pierced the canopy, and the paths were often obscured by a carpet of moss and leaves. Even seasoned woodsmen feared the call of the high country when autumn began to turn the forest into a fiery sea of red and gold. The legend tells of a group of hunters, 5 in total, who entered the woods in late November during the height of the rutting season. Their target was deer, but their aim was pride. They hailed from a small town nestled at the base of the Blue Ridge Mountains, a town where the bond between man and nature was woven tightly. These hunters were ambitious and eager to prove their mettle. Among them was Caleb, the youngest, a wiry lad with a sharp eye for tracking but little patience. Then there was Silas, the group's leader, whose grizzled beard and piercing blue eyes marked him as a man of experience. He carried an heirloom rifle said to have felled bears in a single shot. Gideon, the tallest of the group, was a taciturn fellow, prone to staring too long into the distance as if listening to some invisible voice. Finally, the brothers Eli and Amos rounded out the party. They were twins, inseparable and prone to bouts of rough humor that belied their deep bond. They prepared for the trek with the usual rituals, sharpening blades, checking flintlocks, and sharing stories around the fire the night before. Yet there was one story left unspoken. It was the tale of the Wail, an eerie, mournful cry said to echo through the forest during late autumn. Those who heard it would lose their way, wandering until exhaustion claimed them. But the hunters were young, brash, and dismissive of such tales. At dawn, they set out, rifles slung over their shoulders and boots crunching on the frost-laden ground. The first day of the hunt was promising. They tracked a large buck deep into the forest, each of them marveling at the sharpness of its trail. The signs were fresh, hoofprints in soft soil, stripped bark on the saplings, and tufts of fur caught on low branches. As they ventured deeper, the forest began to change. The trees grew thicker, their gnarled roots forming strange patterns on the forest floor. The air grew colder, and a heavy fog began to seep through the underbrush, curling like ghostly fingers. By midday, they spotted the buck. Its antlers were a crown of ivory, and its body was massive. Silas raised his rifle, but before he could fire, the buck turned its head and stared at them. Its eyes were unlike any they had ever seen. Deep, dark, and full of an intelligence that seemed almost human. Then, with a flick of its tail, it bolted into the woods. The hunters gave chase, their voices echoing through the trees. Caleb, in his youthful eagerness, sprinted ahead, shouting for the others to follow. But the deeper they pursued the buck, the harder it became to track. The trail seemed to vanish, and the fog thickened until even the sunlight dimmed to a pale glow. As darkness fell, the group decided to make camp. They built a fire, its flickering light casting long shadows against the trees. Their laughter and boasts began to fade, replaced by an uneasy silence. The forest felt alive in a way they had never experienced. Every rustle of leaves, every distant crack of a branch seemed amplified. It was Gideon who first mentioned it. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. The others paused, their ears straining. At first, there was nothing but the crackling fire and the occasional hoot of an owl. Then, faintly, it came on the wind. A long, mournful wail that drifted through the trees. It was not the cry of an animal, nor the wind. It was something deeper, something human, yet not. Silas dismissed it as a trick of the wind, but the others exchanged nervous glances. They told stories to distract themselves, tales of past hunts and daring escapes. But as the night wore on, sleep eluded them. Caleb claimed to hear footsteps circling the camp, though no one else could confirm it. By dawn, they were bleary-eyed and tense. On the second day, the forest grew even more oppressive. The buck's trail had reappeared, leading them even deeper into the wilderness. Yet with each step, An unspoken dread settled over them. By midday, Caleb had vanished. The group had stopped to rest, and when they resumed their march, all signs of Caleb were gone. At first, they thought he had wandered ahead, but hours of searching yielded no sign of him. They called his name until their voices grew hoarse, but the forest seemed to swallow the cries. Panic began to set in. Silas insisted they stay together and return to their last known campsite, but the twins argued, their tempers flaring. In the chaos, the wail returned, louder, closer, and filled with an agony that sent shivers down their spines. That night, the fire seemed smaller, the darkness encroaching like a living thing. One by one, they recounted Caleb's last words, searching for meaning, but their thoughts were interrupted by a new sound: laughter. It was faint, high-pitched, and chillingly familiar. It sounded like Caleb. On the third day, Gideon disappeared. They found his rifle propped against a tree, his footprints leading deeper into the forest before vanishing altogether. Silas, once so confident, began to falter. His commands grew frantic, his eyes darting at every sound. The twins clung to each other, their jokes silenced by fear. But as night fell, even they could not resist the pull of the wail. It echoed through the trees, weaving through their minds like a hypnotic chant. Eli awoke to find Amos gone, his bedroll cold and empty. By the time dawn broke, only Silas and Eli remained. They resolved to abandon the hunt and return to the village, but the forest had other plans. The paths they once knew were gone, replaced by endless thickets and dead ends. It was as if the forest itself was shifting, reshaping to trap them. Their last night was marked by silence. No wail, no laughter, no distant cries. Only the oppressive stillness of the woods. Silas clutched his heirloom rifle, muttering prayers under his breath, while Eli stared blankly into the fire. In the early hours of the morning, Eli heard a voice. It was Amos, calling to him. Without thinking, he rose, stumbling to his feet, into the forest, leaving Silas behind. When Silas awoke, he was alone. The wail returned, louder than ever. It seemed to emanate from all directions, growing until it became a deafening roar. Silas fired his rifle into the darkness, his shouts mingling with the ghostly cries, but no reply came. Weeks later, a search party from the village found their camp. The fire was long extinguished, the hunters' belongings scattered and untouched by animals. Of the 5, only Silas was found, sitting against a tree, his rifle across his lap. His eyes were open, but his face was pale and lifeless. His expression was one of terror. Only a diary was left with his final words. The other hunters were never found. To this day, the villagers speak of the wail that echoes through the forest each November. Some claim it's a buck, cursed to lure the hunters to their doom. Others believe it's spirits of the lost, calling out in their eternal anguish. But those who know the forest best, the trappers, the guides, and the elders, warn against venturing too far, for the mountains are alive and they remember, and they do not forgive or return those they've taken. As we leave you here, remember, the legends of our weird world are boundless. If you've enjoyed the stories, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more content. Your support enables us to keep these stories alive. Until next time, stay curious and beware the wails in the woods.